On this episode, we visit Portland. We learn about Portland's new pedestrian plan, PedPDX. Then we look at pedestrian improvements in the Lloyd District. What does research show us about what makes people walk? Finally, the Association of Pedestrian and Bicycle Professionals meets in Portland. Stay tuned.
We're talking with Chris Warner, who's director of the Portland Bureau of Transportation. What is the Bureau of Transportation?
The Bureau of Transportation is the transportation authority for the city of Portland. We have 4,500 lane miles of roads. We have the Portland streetcar. We have the Portland tram. We do parking enforcement. We do all the regulations in terms of the right-of-way management. So we're really one of the biggest bureaus in the city.
Where do pedestrians fit into your mission?
Pedestrians are at the top of our mission. Portland is a very walkable city, but we have a lot of work to do. One of the things we found with Portland in the inner parts of Portland, where the grid is more developed, we have really great pedestrian facilities. As you move farther out into the city, that were only annexed into the city in the 1970s and 80s, we have roads that were basically county roads that are big, they're wide, they're dangerous. So we're really working hard and focusing those roads to be more pedestrian friendly and safer.
What is PedPDX?
PedPDX is our new pedestrian master plan that really has a total take of the pedestrian experience in Portland. We took a look at all of the streets in Portland. We're trying to make sure the investments we're making are in the right places, but it puts pedestrians at the top of the transportation priority list, and trying to figure out ways to make the experience safer and more accessible to all Portlanders.
What goes into creating a plan like that?
It took hundreds of hours of community outreach. We partnered with many groups throughout the city. We worked with our neighborhood associations. We worked with all sorts of nonprofits. It was really our attempt to not only just dictate a plan from us down, but really from the grassroots up, talking to people in their communities on what their needs are and what we can do to make the pedestrian experience better for them. And so it was really a multi-year effort. And it was really focused on community-based values and how do we bring that to light.
How did you get beyond the problem that a lot of places have, where it's the usual suspects that show up at public meetings and the rest of the public might not be heard that well?
That's always an issue. We're very intentional in terms of not just waiting for people to come to us, but actually to go to where they live, go to the living rooms, to the community centers, to wherever people gather. We are very lucky to have a very robust neighborhood association network here. We use those networks in order to make sure that we touched all members of the community. We used a lot of different language for people that have language barriers. We also did a lot of outreach to the disability community, because they are the ones that really have some of the biggest challenges in terms of our pedestrian network. So we did it was as much about doing outreach for the plan as it was about writing the plan.
And plans, sometimes they get stuck on a shelf, they collect dust. What's it going to take to implement this plan?
Well, we were very fortunate that we brought the plan before City Council, and City Council supported the plan. And so now it's just a matter of, as we're implementing it over the next few years, we're really prioritizing our funding and really prioritizing the way we approach all of the work, whether it's planning or design, to really match kind of the values that we have within PedPDX.
And at the Association of Pedestrian Bicycle Professionals this morning, you received an award.
Yes.
What was the award you received?
We received what's called the Platinum Award for being a walkable city. We are one of only 4 cities in the country that have reached platinum status. So even though we're very grateful for the award, we know with PedPDX we have a lot of work to do. So we're very excited to really to grow on the successes we've had, and to make sure that we are really the best pedestrian city, not only in the country but in the world.
After you received your award, you introduced a panel.
Mm-hmm.
What was this morning's panel all about?
This morning's panel at the conference kind of dealt with the experience of the Black community in terms of the pedestrian environment. we work very hard as part of that. Irene Marion, who is our equity manager within the Portland Bureau of Transportation, she really led many of the efforts in terms of doing outreach to the Black community and getting their input on what it is to be part of the pedestrian experience in Portland. So as part of that, we did a number of focus groups within the Black community and came up with kind of a part of the report called Walking While Black, which talked not just about the safety of the infrastructure, but all about the other safety issues that many people of color feel on our streets, in terms of it's not just whether it's safe on the sidewalk because of the facilities themselves, but how they interact with the not only the built environment, but also the social interactions they have. So really trying to raise that discussion of how people feel safe in the right-of-way was part of what it was. So the panel today was just really expanding on the African American experience in terms of active transportation. So we're working very hard to make sure that all interactions are not just about safe on the infrastructure itself, but also safe in terms of us as a cohesive society.
And then if I came back to Portland in a dozen years and talked to you again, what would you like to be able to show me in terms of either implementing PedPDX or dealing with some of these equity issues?
I think number one, we will continue our work to make sure that all the streets of Portland, particularly the ones in the communities of concern out in East Portland, are safer, that people are feels not only the streets themselves are safer, but people feel safe in the right-of-way, but also that we have really built an infrastructure that is reflective of the values of all the community and not just the planners downtown. It really is involves everyone and makes it the city the most livable in the country.
We're in Portland, Oregon, talking with Paul Comrie with Go Lloyd. What is Go Lloyd?
Go Lloyd is a transportation management association. We are actually a public-private partnership. So it's a partnership between the city as well as local property owners here in the Lloyd neighborhood. And we are tasked with improving infrastructure for folks who walk, bike, and take public transportation.
So what's your job with them?
My job, I am the pedestrian program manager as well as the employer outreach manager. So the pedestrian side of things, what I'm doing is planning events to encourage people to get out and walk, to reward them for walking, and to enable them to walk. We also have an infrastructure program where we are investing money from the city directly back into the neighborhood to improve the pedestrian environment. Sometimes those improvements are crosswalk improvements or adding mid-block crossings for pedestrians, or even things as simple as just adding garbage cans so that they have a place to throw their trash away. The other half of my job as the employer outreach manager is I am working with employers here in the neighborhood to improve their transit benefit packages for their employees, to make it easier for employees who work here in Lloyd to commute to work either by transit, by biking, or by walking.
So what's this street behind us, this crosswalk behind us, and how do they look different than they did a while ago?
So this is Multnomah Street. This is one of the kind of highlighted streets here in the Lloyd neighborhood. Many years ago, this was a auto-focused street. We had 2 lanes of vehicle traffic in each direction, as well as parking on either side. Now, Go Lloyd, along with other leaders here in the neighborhood, really wanted to change the face of the neighborhood, and we felt that changing Multnomah Street was a good way to do that. So what we see behind us now is very different. We now have just 1 auto traffic lane in each direction. We still have some parking, but it's only on one side of the street, and what we have now, instead of parking on both sides of the street, is actually a protected bike lane. On one side it's protected by parked vehicles, and then on the north side we actually have the protection is offered by planters. So just, large concrete planters separating the bike lane from the auto traffic lane.
Now, what does that do for the crossing experience of a pedestrian when you only have to cross 1 lane at a time instead of 2?
Well, as you can see right behind me, we've actually done a lot on this particular mid-block crossing to make it easier for pedestrians. In addition to the median refuge, where a pedestrian can stop and make sure that traffic on the other side of the street is stopping to allow them to cross. We do have these protected areas where we have the parking protection for the bike lane. This serves as an additional refuge for pedestrians. So the crossing distance is a lot shorter, and in addition to that, it's a lot easier for drivers to know that pedestrians are trying to cross the street here, because we have the zebra crossings as well as the flashing lights that are triggered by the pedestrian walk signal here. So much easier for pedestrians to alert cars that they are crossing the street, and much shorter distance for pedestrians, so they are in danger for less time while crossing the street.
Do you have other examples of this sort of improvement in the area?
Yes, so we have made a similar mid-block crossing improvement on 16th, just north of Multnomah Boulevard. That's on the far east end of our neighborhood here. But those are really the two biggest projects that we've done recently for pedestrians. We are looking and kind of working with the city right now for other areas to make improvements. One of those big ideas is the Green Loop. And the Green Loop route, it's a 6.1 mile park and bike and walk facility that would be connecting all of the central city neighborhoods, so downtown Portland, the Pearl, Lloyd here, Central East Side south of us, and the South Waterfront. One of the things we're trying to do to help bring this vision to reality is actually to start to do small crosswalk and intersection improvements and start changing the way people view that route. Instead of it being an auto-focused, auto-supremacy road, we are trying to change the idea so that it's a little bit more pedestrian-friendly and a little bit more bicycle-friendly. So things that we're looking at doing are curb extensions, creative crosswalks, looking at installing kind of a 3D zebra crossing. Again, these are all things to try and get auto drivers to slow down and make it safer for pedestrians and cyclists.
So what happened 2 days ago related to the Green Loop?
The Green Loop. Well, so we have the APBP conference, the Association of Pedestrian and Bicycle Planners, is here in town. And on Sunday, it was Portland's Green Loop Sunday Parkways. Now, Sunday Parkways is a celebration that Portland Bureau of Transportation's been doing for many years. We have about 5 events every summer where a large route is closed down to vehicle traffic. On Sunday it was the Green Loop route, and it's opened up for bicyclists, skateboardists, rollerblades, basically anyone who rolls or walks, but not automobiles. So we had almost 6 miles of city road shut down to automobiles. We had something like 10,000 people out here rolling and walking, lots of fun activities, and it was all on the Green Loop. So building towards that idea, trying to make it a reality.
How does a one-day event like that translate into permanent change?
Well, in Portland, we actually have a really good history of pop-up events over time becoming permanent events. Now, Sunday Parkways, it started as a one-off, and it's grown every single year. We now have it all over the city. We have multiple events per year. But a really great example of a pop-up infrastructure that has become permanent here in Portland is the Better NATO project. NATO Parkway is the street that runs right along the Willamette River in downtown, right next to Waterfront Park. And I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago, some activists here in the city had the idea that shutting down a part of NATO to vehicle traffic and having it being just for pedestrians and people who ride bikes during our festival season would really increase safety and actually increase mobility, because we have those festivals, they come in on Waterfront Park and they kind of take up the whole space, which is normally a space for, normally it's a little bit easier for pedestrians and bicyclists to travel through that area. But with this pop-up, it was very successful, it was highly used, and it's come back every single year, and every single year it's grown, both in the duration of its stay, but also the length of the implementation. And what's new this year is the city implemented the project in May. It was set to last through the summer festival season, but about halfway through the summer, the city announced that it was going to become a permanent installation. So, NATO Parkway, now one of the northbound lanes, the one that's closest to Waterfront Park, is no longer a lane for automobiles. It is a lane for people who bike and people who walk and people who use other alternative forms of transportation.
If I were to come back to Portland in a decade, What would you like to be able to show me in your district?
Oh, well, I'd really like to show you a completed green loop because I'm very excited about this idea. Similar to the Better NATO project, what we're talking about is reclaiming a lane of auto traffic and transitioning it to a much higher use. Making it so that it's a place for pedestrians, a place for cyclists, a place for street cafes, a place for green space. Here in the Lloyd neighborhood, we don't have a lot of park infrastructure. We have one main park. The green loop is a huge opportunity for us to add additional green space to the neighborhood. So in 10 years, I'd love to be able to show you that, and I'd love to be able to show you the completed installation of permanent multnomah, because what you're looking at here is actually kind of an interim design. What we hope to have sooner than 10 years would be a permanent planter protection along for all of the bike lanes. So right now, if you can see in the background, we just have the large concrete rounds, or actually there's one right here. What we'd like to see is a long stretch of concrete barriers that offer more protection and offer more planting space. In addition to that, something else we're really hoping to add to multnomah is floating bus islands. So you can see a bus just drove by. Right now, every time that bus pulls over to unload and load passengers, it has to cross into the bike lane to do that. And obviously that creates conflict. So part of the permanent design that we are looking at for multnomah includes floating bus islands to remove that interaction between the bus and the bike lane. So hopefully you can see all that in about 5 years, but certainly within 10.
We're talking with Nathan McNeil with Portland State University. What do you do at Portland State?
So I'm involved in various kinds of bicycle and pedestrian research, from safety and travel behavior, and a lot of it is about how do we understand what are the factors that influence whether people will or won't decide to walk or to bike. What are the barriers? What are the things that can make them feel comfortable doing it? And really it kind of gets to the issues of how do cities and how do organizations create facilities and programs that can make walking and biking more attractive and more common.
Now, when you go in and try to figure out how people make decisions, where does the researcher start?
Well, it's a great question. So I think we do a lot of survey work to understand, like I said, what are the barriers? What are the things that are stopping people from doing it now? A lot of times it has to do with safety or just the day-to-day concerns of how, what they need to carry with them or how fast they need to get someplace. So first, kind of understanding what are those kinds of barriers. And then starting to look at some evaluations of on-the-ground facilities or programs. Are they helping people overcome those barriers? How do they, and sometimes we create hypothetical situations where we try to present a kind of facility or situation to someone to understand, is this something you would be comfortable with? Is this something that would change your decision making or influence it in some way? So we try to do a lot of combining surveys with actual on-the-ground facilities and evaluations. So that's kind of an overview. But again, a lot of it is getting to people and understanding what are their motivating factors. So.
And you're here in Portland. Do you deal with surveys and data from other places, or you look a lot locally here just because it's so handy?
Yeah, well, so I'd say a lot of our work is as opportunities arise. And so we're blessed to have a lot of good opportunities here in Portland and a good relationship with the Portland Bureau of Transportation. On when they are implementing new facilities, they're great partners to come to us and say, we want to find out how this is working for people. But we do also do it throughout the country, sometimes through foundations. So we've worked with People for Bikes in the past on protected bike lanes. And bike share is another area where we get the opportunity to do surveys in cities around the country to go visit those places and document what's going on there. So it's kind of opportunistic, and where we can, who wants to pay us to do this kind of work, and then there are other times where we've worked with the Federal Department of Transportation on national studies as well. So it's just, as the opportunities arise.
Do you find the factors that people use in making their decisions are similar in different cities, or are people more or less the same everywhere, or what differences do you find?
That's a good question. We've done some work on, particularly recently, around bike share and equity. And so we have found that the decisions that are made in different neighborhoods can be different from different kinds of people. So lower income groups, people of color, may be in communities where distances are further, for example, and so it's more challenging to walk or bike to get to places, or where transit and other options aren't as available. One of the things that we have found, though, is that traffic concerns, and particularly traffic safety, is something that across the different cities that we've looked at, and from bicyclists to pedestrians, it tends to be one of the biggest, demotivating factors, I suppose. So facilities that can kind of help people feel safer are one of the biggest things across the different geographic areas that we've looked at that can help. So,
other than safety, are there other factors that could encourage people to walk more as part of their daily lives?
So there are a lot, and I think one of the challenges is that it's the potential barriers to walking or biking are there's a lot of different buckets of what they could be. So as I mentioned, the distances and making sure that things are close enough to get to by walking or biking. Outside of safety, just having comfortable facilities so that it's an enjoyable trip to get to and from the things that you need to get to. I think a lot of people that have families or need to haul things with them. A lot of the people that rely on cars, it's because they have to bring things with them, or to take kids to school or to events. So thinking about ways to make those choices easier for people. I think that's the challenge for places that are trying to make this easier, is that it is a range of things. And I don't think that there is generally a silver bullet to answer how do you get people to walk or bike. So it's not a complete answer, but it's a complicated area. So
What's on the cutting edge of research right now? If I came back in a couple of years, what would you have that might be a little new to show me?
I think one of the things that was talked about a lot about at the conference here is data sharing and data availability, and with bike sharing systems becoming pretty much common in every city, scooters and other micromobility options. What do we do with this data, and what does it tell us? How do we understand? How do we better understand how that can help us design streets and design facilities? And how do we? Everyone's cell phone is pinging their GPS location all the time, and so what's happening with that data? So there are the privacy questions, but then there's application questions, and how do we take all that data and make it meaningful? So I think that's something that we're working to try to figure out how to do better. I think lots of the cities and companies that are here are trying to do that, and I hope that within the next couple of years we better understand how to make it meaningful and how to implement projects based on that data. So
We're talking with Kate McCusker with Portland State. What do you do at Portland State University?
I'm the communications director for the Transportation Research and Education Center there.
What does the center do?
We focus on multimodal research, a lot of bike ped. A good chunk of our projects are equity focused as well. We also teach high school camps for transportation. We also lead multi-day workshops for bike ped professionals. We run data programs. We do a lot.
What's been going on here in Portland this week?
We have APBP 2019. a multi-day conference for bike and ped and scooter professionals. I don't.
So what goes on at that?
A lot of learning, a lot of networking, some deep dive workshops and roundtables, and of course parties.
What was your role in organizing it?
I was the chair of the local host committee, so that meant herding all the cats, but it was a primarily Portland-based committee of volunteers, as well as some longtime APBP members from across the country, supporting the planning and development of this conference, which has been 2 years in the making. So,
What's the turnout been like?
It's sold out. We had over 450 professionals and advocates and community members join us here this week in Portland to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the organization. The first APBP conference was actually here in Portland, so coming back to where it started.
Other than adding scooters to the list, what's changed in the field over the last quarter century?
I think a shifting of perspective about who we talk about and who we're centering in terms of the conversation around active transportation, who it really benefits, and making sure that safety is also a huge factor, and safety for all. So I think that has been a big shift in the conversation paradigm, and not just getting down bike lanes, but what does it really mean for people to move and walk and roll to get to their places of work, play, their community. So I think it's a de-emphasis maybe necessarily on kind of the infrastructure, but also the human constructs behind transportation and how we interact with transportation.
What's Portland been doing that so many people wanted to come to the conference in this city?
We have been doing a lot of protected bike lanes and a lot of research around that infrastructure as well. So we kind of have the data to back it up. What else has Portland been doing? We launched an e-scooter fleet and did a comprehensive e-scooter study, including feedback from community members who did not even use the e-scooters too. So kind of combining user experience plus the people who experienced it happening to them. And now the city is in a second phase of using e-scooters. So that's kind of very new to Portland.
Visit us on the internet at www.pedestrians.org.